talk on satellite developments in Southern Africa yesterday afternoon. For those that missed his presentation, all of the presentations from yesterday are on the BATC website under Film Archive. And I'd like to thank the British Amateur Television Club for their speedy work in getting the videos up there so quickly. Right, I'd like to pass you now over to Hans, who will be running the IARU Satellite Forum.
Thanks very much. And find out how to use my microphone. Is it off? Okay. Better? Yes. Hey, come on. This is a different program that I've got. Say slideshow, right? Now it should be all somewhere.
From beginning all the way.
Hey, logical. Right, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks to Mark. I think some of the things he said is very much, I'm not quite sure how to put it, but you know, I made a presentation in the US last year, turning university CubeSats into amateur radio satellites and frequency coordination. And somewhere along the line it must have found some resonance, because I see there was in Mark's talk a lot more emphasis on that. So I'm going to first talk about that, and let's talk a little bit about semantics. We often see in the amateur radio press, and particularly on the audio bulletins, we see they say it's an amateur radio satellite. And there's a big difference between an amateur radio satellite and a satellite operating on amateur frequencies. It may be semantics, but it's actually important to differentiate between the two. Both can benefit amateur radio, but I think the important issue there is that if you look at it this way, an amateur radio satellite is something that has distinct operation for radio amateurs, while a satellite operating on amateur radio frequencies often is a university project that has science applications, but on the same way it does have some benefit often to the amateur radio fraternity. But I think we still need to differentiate between the two, just to make sure that our own identity as an amateur satellite doesn't get confused in the whole field of satellites operating on amateur radio frequencies. So we need to be turning students into radio amateurs, because that would be the way to obviate that problem. University CubeSats can be an ideal mechanism to recruit students to become licensed radio amateurs. And in many countries it's actually a legal requirement to be licensed to operate a satellite ground station operating in the amateur service. In some countries, as long as there's one radio amateur somewhere involved in the project, they allow everybody else to operate the ground station. But that's actually quite contrary to the ITU amateur radio regulations. It, however, requires more involvement from radio amateurs, clubs and national societies. Because if we as a radio amateur, we as clubs or national societies become far more involved with the university projects, then we can turn it around. We can turn those youngsters into radio amateurs. And they will not only provide benefits in terms of the education and the science they're doing, but they also provide a base of knowledge or a body of knowledge to the amateur fraternity. An example here, a picture of the Cape Peninsula University of Technology in Cape Town. These students are building the satellite that's going to be launched together with FunCube soon, hopefully soon. And they all had to become radio amateurs, because one thing we told them, once your satellite is in orbit, there's no ways that you can operate it. There's no ways that you can actually control it unless you're licensed. So they all took a course, which wasn't too difficult if you're an electronic student, and they passed that exam and they all have call signs. Now, The IARU frequency coordination process is something that I really wanted to talk about today. During the frequency coordination process, the question is asked, have you involved your National Amateur Radio Organization or your National Amateur Radio Society? In the US, also in the UK, and I can speak of course for South Africa, the answer is most affirmative. And in many instances, radio amateurs are actively involved in the process of building and constructing the satellite and managing the satellite. For many other countries, this question is not answered and often avoided. We even get questions sometimes, what is a radio amateur? They know the frequencies, but they actually don't understand what amateur radio is all about. Because somewhere along the line, somebody told them, if you want to do the experiment in a satellite that's more exciting, you can buy this transceiver from us and you just put it into that box and put your bit of science and then send it up. But it's not as simple as that. So it's a level of amateur radio involvement. We get coordination requests, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And often the radio amateur that is required to be listed on that form is just there for licensing purposes. In other words, he has no involvement in the process of building that CubeSat or whatever satellite the university is building. Just his name is there, his call sign. Now you soon pick that up, because our policy is that when we do frequency coordination, the actual letter authorizing or telling them what the most logical frequency to use is sent to that particular licensed person. And then of course we find out that he doesn't really actually know what it was about. Sad. Becoming an active part of the team with definite objectives, I think, is very important. I think that radio amateurs that become part in university satellites can contribute technical knowledge and experience, because a lot of our radio amateurs have a lot of experience in satellites, in tracking, in commanding. So therefore we can add that expertise to the science project, because the students often involved really are interested in the science they are doing, and the satellite part is actually just a side issue. We can assist with training and to get students and staff licensed, and I think it's an important issue for our own future. And we can teach the culture of amateur radio. Amateur radio is not just taking a course for 3 months and writing the exam and getting a license. I think you need to also teach the culture. Get them involved. What is amateur radio? What is the culture that actually drives us, that drives the passion? Because if you can teach that culture and that passion that we have, then you find that the whole project has more passion and far more involvement. And you recruit students to become part of your AMSAT group. Have special student membership categories or whatever you like, but get them involved, bring them to colloquiums, bring them to the AMSAT Space Symposium or whatever other symposiums there are. It's very important. I mean, I don't see many students here. In the past, we used to have lots of students at the AMSAT Colloquium. I see a few, but not the majority like we did in the past. I mean, I remember when we had it at Surrey, half the room was filled with students. And we'd be missing that opportunity. Amateur radio influence on university satellite payloads. Now we should explore the opportunity for amateur radio to benefit from a payload. In other words, if a science payload, and I think Mark remarked on that as well, is only running often sometimes for a month, sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months. Why should we not turn that particular payload into something that is of use to the amateur fraternity? And it's quite simple to do that in many cases. We should look for opportunities that once the primary science experiment is completed, to turn that payload into something, as I said, useful for radio amateurs. We should also act as ambassadors for the project and keep the amateur community informed of the project and possible benefits that may accrue from the amateur satellite service. In other words, if you as a radio amateur become involved in the building or the construction and the involvement at a university where they're building maybe a science project that is based on a satellite or is incorporated in a satellite, make sure that the amateur community in your area is involved in that. Help them understand what you're doing. Help them understand what the university is doing. Get them involved, because that way we spread the word and that way we get more involved. Now some examples The ISIS transceiver, one of them, has an FM to double sideband voice transponder option, which could be configured after the science mission has been completed. Now, what our objective should now be is we should work with some of the other suppliers that supply these kits that some of these universities buy, and say, hey, if you want to do this and you want to use our amateur frequencies, you want to come and park on our terrain, there's a charge to that. And that charge is that you make something happening for us. Why should we just give you the opportunity to use our frequency spectrum and you don't give something back to the people who actually own, if you like, that spectrum? I think it's very important. And I think we should work with these people as much as we can to do this. Some of the University CubeSat missions have interesting science missions that could be of interest to radio amateurs. I mean, we see quite a lot, and I think the sad part maybe is that we as the coordinating group don't actually publicize the kind of interesting experiments that some of these university satellites have included. While you may say it's not really our job to do that, the university should actually use its own outreach to tell everybody what they're doing, what kind of science projects they're doing. And it's sad that you see some really interesting ones, and yet nobody knows about it. We see it. Often I say to them, we're interested, please tell us a bit more about it, but like it's pulling teeth. Send us some pictures of what happens at your university, at the students working with the thing, so we can share it with other people. And that's also one of the objectives that I think as a radio amateur that becomes involved with a science project at a university and a CubeSat project or another satellite project, bring that information into the amateur community so that we can share the kind of interesting things that some of these CubeSats are doing. And maybe a lot of us will have a lot more fun using university CubeSats for some of the things they're doing, like propagation research. They do a lot of stuff these days on ionospheric research, on controlling reaction wheels. You name it. There's a whole field that is open, and yet we're not harnessing that into our own community. So I have a call to action. Get involved with the university CubeSats. It's in your own interest. Become an ambassador for amateur radio at university level and school level for that matter, because some high schools also have satellite projects today. And communicate to students and the university staff the benefits that by becoming a radio amateur, the benefits that it will bring to their project. And recruit them as members of your AMSAT group, because after all, there's this old saying that you find a lot of unity in strength, and if you swell your numbers, you have a better voice. Share project information with the larger amateur community. If you look at RSGB Bulletin, you look at QST, CQ magazine, you see very little of what goes on into the satellite world. Maybe there's something special that happens, you may see one article, but hey, I remember the days of 73 magazine. We used to have almost at every issue there were satellite issues being discussed. So we were talking to the general amateur community, which we are not doing right now. And it's really up to you to start writing some of these articles, because I'm sure the journals are always looking for material. Every journal is. I know AMSAT, the AMSAT journal, I see the appeal every time, please guys write. And I think RSGB, I was talking to somebody yesterday about that, they were looking for articles. And I think QST, if you talk to ARRL, they're always looking for interesting material. And we're doing a lot of interesting things and we're not sharing it. So what did they say? They say something in the I don't know if I have it on that slide. They say something in the academic community, publish or die. And it's very true. If you're in an academic and you don't publish, your career is limited. So why should it be different? We as radio amateurs should publish what we're doing. Because otherwise we could die. We could be forgotten about. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the process for those of you that may not be aware of what's happening. The IARU Administrative Council appointed the Satellite Advisor with the task of coordinating satellite frequencies and activities in the amateur service. Well, this happens to be me. Jobs open. You want to apply? We have so many CubeSats every month. I tell you, I think we're quite happy to find somebody. I'm assisted, or he's assisted by a panel to make recommendations, to keep an updated record of the various coordinated projects and maintain information pages on www.iaru.org.satellite. There's a lot of information there. And the information page on the IARU web, it's really there to assist builders and prospective builders of satellites that will operate on frequencies allocated by the ITU to the amateur service, a comprehensive set of guidelines, and we've produced quite a lot. It talks about what is an amateur satellite. It talks about how important it is for frequency coordination. It talks about some of the international forums. It talks about the advisory panel, who you could contact. It also has a section on controlling of satellites, because that's another big issue. ITU regulation says that if something goes wrong on your satellite, you must be able to switch it off. You know that most of these CubeSats don't have command facilities. They have no facilities to switch off when something goes haywire. If the transmitter becomes permanently locked on, or the frequency device goes totally spurious and starts spewing out RF over a wide spectrum, people say, oh, well, what are you worried about? It's only 400 milliwatts, it's not an issue. But hey, 400 milliwatts, 500 kilometers up is a strong signal. So we have produced a guideline to say these are the important issues. And we have a quite great difficulty making all these satellite builders understand the importance of this. And we often make recommendations on how you can do it. Look, if you had to stick to the letter of the law of ITU regulations, it's almost impossible, because that almost says you must switch it off immediately. Well, you can't, because unless you have ground stations in every part of the world where your satellite may be tumbling, you can't do it. So, you know, we look at the basis, well, if you have 2 ground stations and that information is available, how to control your satellite, you know, we'll find that you're meeting the spirit of that regulation. You can't meet the letter of that regulation. But I mean, that's one of the things that we quite keen on, and we promote all the time. And then the ITU has requirements for amateur radio satellites. You can't just launch a satellite without going through an ITU process. Now, the ITU process is not by you, the builder, but it's by your administration. And administrations seem to also have people that don't understand anymore what the ITU regulations are about. So we had quite a big argument with the ITU at one stage, and then we sat around the table and agreed with them, here is the process that your regulator should be following. So we actually made it very simple. It's all on the website now. It's now ITU approved. So if you follow that system with your regulator, or help your regulator to follow the system, then at least you're not falling foul of ITU regulations. So it's a service that we as the coordinating panel have been providing. Then you can also look at the frequency coordination status, and you click on the link, and by courtesy of AMSAT-UK, they're maintaining that. I think Graham is very quick in updating that regularly, and it's quite interesting. You make a small mistake, gee, you see the emails that we get quickly, it's not up to date. So you know what, AMSAT-UK, you're doing a great service, because that particular section that you're keeping up to date is looked at frequently. Not easy to keep it up to date, we can tell you. Right, the panel, as I said, for my sins, I've been in that job for quite a few years now. Region 1 is Graham Sherwell, G3ZV. I think Graham makes a massive contribution. His involvement in amateur satellites and CubeSats, and his understanding, don't do that to me, because I never get the opportunity to say that. He's telling me to shut up. He makes a tremendous contribution in this field. He's very knowledgeable, and often, you know, he actually helps us to do the right thing. Because, you know, you need people with different experiences to actually be able to advise you. Not all of us, each one of us has our own kind of expertise. And thanks, Graham, for your help. We have a new guy, Mike Ruprecht, DK3WN. He only just recently joined us, and Mike is also making a good contribution. Then Lee McLam, KU4OSK from Region 2. Lee is, of course, very much involved in the practical launching of satellites in his day job. So he often brings a perspective into something that maybe we may miss. And then Art Fellow is the guy that knows every ITU regulation backwards, and he keeps me on my toes, because sometimes I say, I don't think it's that important. I think they're doing a good, let's just ease off a bit. But he makes sure that I stick to the rules. And so he makes and he has a lot of experience. And then we have Region 3, Shizuo Endo, and he makes a great contribution. Shizuo's speciality is what do we always say on link budgets? I reckon link budget's important, but if I know this thing has got an antenna of that size and it's got 400 milliwatts and it's in a 500 kilometer orbit, I'm not too worried about the link budget, because I know it will work from practical experience. But he keeps us on the straight and narrow in terms of making sure that we look at link budgets and so on. And the reason is actually very sound to do that, because if you don't do that, you may find a lot of birds that getting there with marginal signals and maybe just creating more interference than anything else, and not really usable signal. So, that's one of the reasons. Then we have some special advisors. Ray Soifert, W2RS, he was one of our panel members for a long time. But, every so often he gets copies of all the things we do, and every so often we get like an email. That is not right. You cannot do it like that. And that's the voice of experience, and it's very great to have him in the background checking what we're doing. Jane King is the guy that's obviously very technically involved, and he will come in when there's an issue with a link budget, and he also produced that link budget program where you can work out and how you need to do it. And then Norbert, DF5 DPN, is now being replaced by Mike, but he stays on the advisory panel, because particularly when we get German missions, he is the one that interfaces when there's a language issue, and when some of the organizations in Germany will be allowed to do things which we believe are not particularly true to the amateur fraternity, or in terms of the ITU regulations, and DLR may have a different opinion, but he sorts out all those kind of issues. We don't get involved in that, and he is a great link between us and the German authority, and also the DARC. So it's a great team that's working together. The big challenge we have is that Graham and I in the same time zone. American guys are about 6-7 hours different, and on the other side of Japan it's different. So the only time that we can actually now meet is 11 hours UTC, but both Graham and I work full time, so it's quite difficult to fit that in. So we often, I can't find the time to do this, because 11 hours UTC means it's 7 o'clock in the morning for our US colleagues, and it's 8-9 o'clock at night for our Japanese colleagues. So sometimes I say, no, hang on, it's my lunchtime. I mean, my wife just gets fed up because I never have lunch with her. So we sometimes have to amend the time, but it's quite a challenge when you have a team around the world. We're using Skype, by the way, and we meet almost every week, 2 weeks, sometimes twice a week, sometimes 3 weeks apart, depending on what our activities are. I mean, we could ideally meet weekly, because there's so much coming through. So the amateur service frequency spectrum, is it economically viable to give radio amateurs so much spectrum? Ask that question. Mariko's asking me that all the time. We get asked, a lot of people asking that. Is it viable for amateur radio to have all that spectrum? In the old days it was fine. It was an ITU allocated spectrum. Nobody worried about it. But now everybody's looking for more spectrum, and now they keep on querying. Is it viable? Should amateur radio have all that spectrum, particularly on the high frequency bands? So the question is, or the point is, you use them or lose them. And that's another issue that we need to start addressing. If I look at the CubeSats, most of the CubeSats are done on 2 meters, 70 centimeters. Very seldom do we find any higher frequencies. So one of our objectives now is also to try and sort of encourage, and we're encouraging you to encourage universities that you're involved with, start using some of the higher bands. Because that's where the danger is. And there are a couple of CubeSats that operate there, but they're not really significantly enough to see. Now, if you find that in Europe there's a lot more activity on the higher frequencies, but if you look at the rest of the world, outside North America and Western Europe, very little. So those are the areas that are saying, hey, these frequencies are up for grab, they're not being used. So why don't we talk about what we are doing? And as I said earlier, publish or die. We should be talking about what we're doing on all these frequencies, what are happening, what is amateur radio doing using all these bands, because we do some wonderful things. Maybe not enough, but we do, but we don't tell anybody. We don't publish the stuff. Look at QST, look at RST. When you read something about something exotic happening on a very high frequency, seldom. So we need to publish in our journals, we need to publish in other journals. And also I have a job opportunity. I'm looking for a data administrator, somebody that can create a database of all the CubeSats and satellites that we have coordinated. Yes, we have a small Excel spreadsheet, but it's not good enough anymore. What we need is somebody that's prepared to join our team, that takes the responsibility of creating a database that shows the frequency, the satellite, what the satellite is due to do, when it's launched, hasn't been launched, was the launch successful, all that kind of information. I'm trying to do it on Excel. I know nothing about Excel. I never used it in my life, so I had to try and learn a little bit. But I managed to keep the frequency and the satellite going. But we need a database that you can search. You need a database that can control all that, and that we can actually publish and make publicly available as well for people to see what frequency we're using. So the pay is zero, but the satisfaction is that you're doing it for amateur radio's future. And I think that should be enough. If you're a database administrator or a guy that can design a database, talk to Graham, talk to me, because you can do it right at home. We can supply all that stuff via the internet, all the documents that we have available. I just end up by saying amateur radio is the greatest of all scientific hobbies, and I think I really truly believe that. And again, thanks to my partners in crime. They make it all worthwhile, and without them we wouldn't be able to do this job as satellite frequency coordinators. Why the program says politics, I don't think I have touched on politics yet, but maybe we'll leave that for another time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Hans. Time for a couple of very quick questions.
I've got one from the internet.
Thanks, Hans, for your presentation. VU3TYG, this in India, is asking another question. He says, many times we may have, for example, in AMSAT India, not be aware of student projects in our country and hence may not get an early opportunity to participate in these projects. Can the Satellite Frequency Coordination Body connect the national organisations with such project teams as and when they receive requests for allocations of amateur radio frequencies?
I think it's a very good point. Yeah, we at some stage did that, and maybe we've been a bit lax in doing so. Normally what we used to do, and maybe Graham, it's a good idea we reinstitute that, is when we do the coordination letter, which tells you what the project is about and the frequencies that we're looking at, is maybe that's a point in time to actually copy the National Society. But also like to point out to the National Society, if they go to www.IARU, www.org/satellite, and they actually look at coordinated frequencies. They see a short synopsis of the actual frequency coordinated, the satellite, and the body that's involved, and sort of a very brief description of what it's about. But I think it's a good point. Yeah, we should be doing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? I'd like to thank Hans very much for the presentation. Right, it's now time for the coffee break. Can you all meet back here?